So the first thing I wanted to start with, obviously, is your PFP. That is really cool. Curious what it means. I have ideas, but I want to hear from the source.
I kind of want to hear your interpretations first.
Because it's 3 faces. They represent different parts of your personality. I don't even know if this is a collection or something you designed and painted, because it's incredible. Like it's so sharp. But yeah, it's like 3 different faces, and they each seem to be looking in a different direction, and they each seem to be kind of having a different facial expression. So my thought is, it's almost like it's representing 3 different parts of you. Am I overthinking this?
You're not overthinking it. However, it is interesting because so you're right, actually, on many, many accounts. I painted it in high school. You know, I was this driven Asian kid, child of Chinese immigrants, elder child as well. Art was one that I actually really loved. It was one that I had to petition my parents to let me do, even though they thought it was a bit of a waste of time. And they were like, are you really gonna go to art school? But yeah, this was part of my high school art portfolio. It was a self-portrait. There are actually 5 versions of me in the full version. It's kind of like a long horizontal image, and I had to crop it for to fit into kind of that circle ratio. So only 3 fit, and they were the 3 in the middle that were my favorite 3 faces. And if you see the full version, it kind of is like me turning my head from one side all the way to the other. And it starts off very pixelated and abstract, and then it gets clearer and clearer in each new evolution.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, congratulations on being such an amazing artist. I didn't realize. That is a really beautiful piece of art. Yeah. And second of all, I'm glad I guess I got lucky on guessing what it means or represented. I would love to see the full image, because this idea of pixelation that comes in, and it's also this idea of I guess ourselves finding or discovering ourselves and becoming whole. I have something on my body that's tattooed that I designed when I was 13. And as any teenager would know, there's a lot of angst. The world is new. You're barely discovering what it means to be a part of it. And I created this design of suns that are battling each other. And it was my mind. I was of different minds of everything. And I was always in a constant battle with myself. And so I took one of those suns, the one that actually absorbed everything else and just became kind of one strong whole. And that's what's on my calf. So I this story also resonates with me. I was not as good an artist. I did pursue some fine arts, but never that good.
Well, I would love to see your portfolio too. We could do tattoo tours in another maybe edition of this podcast. But that's cool. I mean, it sounds like you were a very precocious 13-year-old, to be honest.
Yeah, I guess the story goes, the one that I share that shows kind of how geeky I could be, is that when I was 11 years old, I read the dictionary twice, front to back, just because I was interested in words. So that was my vibe, for sure.
Do you remember the craziest words that you discovered? Which words did you read that you were like, what?
You know what's funny? Now that I think about it, I think that's also when I discovered speed reading. So I really just was there to try to consume as much content as quickly as possible, say that I did it. And then I went back because I realized I did it quite quickly. But, I think that just kind of continued to express itself in school, in high school and college. I was always very interested in literature, in English. So I minored in that. So yeah, that definitely was something that carried, I get over into part of my adult life.
Yeah, that's awesome.
We can make this strictly about art for sure. We could totally geek out on all this stuff.
I love that. Let's do a whole 30-minute intro that has nothing to do with crypto or Unlonely or anything, and we could just get into this. I love that. I was gonna say I would consider myself a bit of a speed reader as well, but I was always really jealous of people that just have such good retention. I feel like I can read and process and kind of spin that out very quickly, but then my retention over I don't know, a week later, a month later, years later is just it's not there. And I know it's one of those things that you're meant to be able to train, but it feels really difficult to train. And it feels like some people just have I don't know, like literally like visual photographic memory effectively.
Right. Well, I think, yeah, there's different personalities. And one thing I'll tell you is as I've gotten older, I was going to say as I aged, but gotten older sounds a little bit better. I've realized that I've adapted more to slow reading and retention versus what I was really good at in my younger years, which was I could read a book, I'm talking about like a thick book in a matter of hours because I could literally just read very quickly and I was going through a page every few seconds. Yeah. And I mean, it was enough for me to like cram, if you will, like when it came to either like regurgitating for an essay or some exam. But as I've gotten older, I've definitely gotten much slower, which kind of sucks because then I can't really read at the pace that I would love to again.
Yeah. But it's more intentional.
Yeah. Definitely. And I think part of it is because, and we're going to get into this as a founder, you need to, at least for me, I've really become interested in reading stories that like improve me, like what I do as a professional, like, so what I bring to the table to a business, to a startup, and then applying that. And I really can't do that if I'm reading through very quickly. I need to retain, I need to highlight, I need to extract some of these notes into something that is actionable. So yeah, the meaningfulness definitely comes from that. Yeah, let's dive deeper because I do want to dive into your story because I think it's really interesting. You've already kind of started touching on some of that there. So I'm going to run through a quick intro here. I'm also going to say GM to the crowd on Unlonely that's starting to gather there, and we're going to take some questions and want to talk more about like how I can use Unlonely better for our live streams or as pod streams as I call it. So GM, everybody, welcome back. This is our weekly podcast, the Crypto Consumer Chronicles. Every week I mess something up in that. We meet here every week to define and demystify consumer crypto with the people who are building it. Make sure to sign up to our newsletter at cryptosapiens.xyz. This show is brought to you by Cryptosapiens. Make sure you go ahead and subscribe to Hypersub or to our Hypersub. All of that is available on our website, cryptosapiens.xyz. All right. So today we're here with Grace of Unlonely. Let's go through, first of all, how did you get into crypto? Because it sounds like you had this very strong foundation of art or interest, maybe better said, in arts. How did you go into technology? Was that just, like you said, the Chinese immigrant parents that won? Or was this something that was always in the back and you're like, I just needed a little extra motivation and now I'm all in?
It's a long and winding journey as always. I find myself not like those people that have like 5 and 10-year vision boards that are like so clear in their heads. I admire those people because I really don't feel like I have that. Like I have like interests. I have things that I know I don't want to do. And then I feel like I'm just like, whatever opportunity feels right, wherever I'm being like drawn to right now, or like the people that I'm talking to feel really inspiring and motivating and it's like giving me energy, that is what I end up following. So I guess my path, it started off, I like have an artistic background. I was very, very interested in like visual arts, music. I played piano and violin. Again, also very stereotypically Chinese of me growing up in Southern California. But I knew I wanted to do something along with that. And I think in high school was interested in fashion, as most sort of like high school girls were. I started a fashion magazine at my high school. And that was like my fun passion project that brought together like the visuals, the layout design, the kind of creative with coming up with a photo shoot, getting your friends together and doing all of that. So that was very like the origin stories. Then I went to college and I was like, I need to do something applied with this. And that ended up being retail. Went down the retail path for like my entire college career, 3 different internships, like at an e-commerce startup, at Bloomingdale's, like in the corporate department, and thought that that was going to be my life. Hated the culture, did not want to move to New York. Ended up doing a total 180 and working in industrial supplies for a year and like being a supervisor in the warehouse department for actually less than a year, maybe like 8 months. And then basically got a random job offer at Google and was like, well, obviously I'm going to take that. That is like the dream job that everyone wanted to land, at 22 or 23 years old. So I don't know how to really answer the question of like, did I always want to go into tech? I don't think so. Like, I thought it was really interesting. I thought it was like a great place to be. Obviously, Google was like this very shiny thing to chase. And once I got that, I felt like I was maybe like set for life. And then I think what was more interesting was like coming to terms with the fact that I actually wasn't super fulfilled there, like 3 years in, 5 years in. And did I see myself really just like spending the rest of my life there, coasting to a certain degree and being surrounded by nice people, but really being able to get away with working like 15 to 20 hours a week and still getting like very strong ratings and performance ratings and stuff like that. It didn't feel like where I wanted my mid 20s and 30s to end. So at that point, I started looking at like what else was out there that really could like beat my experience in big tech up until that point. And there was also, I think, an interesting cultural shift around the narrative of big tech where up until that point, it felt like it had a kind of very positive brand and it was just bringing great progress and developments and benefits to society. And it sort of had tipped over to the other side of that scale where people were becoming aware of the negative externalities of big tech and, oh, you think you're getting all of these products and services for free, but really they're extracting all your data and selling it to advertisers. And that is what is making this world go round. So I think that motivation is like when I found crypto through a friend, that like really got me interested was like, oh, it's actually like offering an alternate solution and world and sort of like version of the internet to what we know right now. And I guess the rest is history. I can get into it, but that is sort of like the starting point. And I've been all in crypto since 2020 now.
Wow. I feel like 2020 was definitely a pivotal moment for crypto. The world was a very different place. We were all having to figure out new ways to engage, right, around the world, maybe with friends that we weren't seeing as often. And I agree. I think crypto definitely facilitated both a fun tech stack to build things on. So if you were technically inclined or technologically inclined, that seems like a good path. But also, I think that there were some fun experiences that were popping up, especially in the financial sector at that time, right? Because that's DeFi summer. That's when it really kicked off. It really enabled kind of like this new and kind of novel way of playing with money and potentially even making money. So yeah, I mean I've heard 2020 be a year for people when they came in, and it's been really interesting to track people's journey since then, because I feel like you picked a path. You were going to go the full path of degenerate and just be always trying to like find the next airdrop, right? And that was your full-time job. Or you really fell in love with the technology and there were ideas, there was things that you were already cooking that you're like, how can I implement this technology to make it better? It sounds like you took the regen path, less of the degen path. Walk me a little through though, because I don't think I've really talked to too many people that have gone to work at Google. Anything that you learned there that you feel like you use often now? Maybe some structure, some systems that really you benefit from today?
That's a great question. It's actually one that I laugh about because what we ended up building with Unlonely actually ended up using the skill set of what I was doing at YouTube very effectively. So my last 3 years at Google, I was at YouTube, I was working with creators, and we basically had this program where sort of like, if you were a creator that was bringing like X dollars of revenue to YouTube, then you would unlock this special service of having a real human that you could talk to on the other side of the platform, rather than sort of like screaming into the abyss, like, what's happening? I don't understand how the algorithm works. Why am I getting demonetized? What's this new content policy? All this kind of stuff. So that was, like, I think my job was really like hand-holding creators and making them feel like seen by the platform, helping them brainstorm new content ideas, educating them on new features that were being rolled out on YouTube, giving them opportunities to maybe work with brands or collaborate with other creators, like all of these sorts of things where actually in streamer onboarding, I find myself, like, especially at the beginning when we were just sort of grinding and trying to get like new users on, each onboarding call that I was having with a new streamer felt exactly like the onboarding call I would have with a new creator that like entered my portfolio or something like that, where I would, except for all the language that I used for like YouTube things and Web 2 things was just replaced with Web 3 terminology. So that was quite funny and interesting, and like I think a very maybe serendipitous, but actually now that I think about it, like everything has definitely happened this way for a reason. Brian and I came up with this idea, and I was like very sold on it because it spoke to my previous experience. And then beyond that, I think like that's like a very clear, concrete day-to-day parallel between what I was doing before. Definitely beyond that, I would say like some of the structure, even unlearning some of the structure has been useful, and sort of not like thinking like, oh, super rigid or like, but like at the same time, it's like, okay, KPIs are useful. We should be measuring things. Like we are a scrappy startup, but we also should have some rigor in understanding like where things are moving.
Absolutely. I agree. I think it's funny sometimes to hear people kind of dismiss KPIs, where I think like in a startup space, they're probably more important than, in a traditional or a non-startup, because there are things that you're constantly experimenting with to see, how your audience or your users, kind of respond to it, to see where the product's becoming sticky. And that needs to be measured, because otherwise you might be overspending time and funds to build something that there's absolutely no interest for, and missing something that your customers are demanding. So yeah, absolutely. Don't dismiss KPI startup. That's business 101.
We're like a little bit in a space where I think everyone is a little bit like, oh yeah, finger in the air. VCs are, sort of like wishy-washy. The vibes are good or something like that. But I think on the other hand, the Farcaster crowd is very, very data heavy, and they care about all that stuff. So I think there is definitely a balance to the cultures, and within our team, there's that as well. Brian is like, vision, product led, like, let's just go on to the next thing. And I'm like, well, maybe we should wait for more holistic results before we like scrap this thing or decide that this is the new thing.
Yeah, no, I totally understand like moving fast, introducing kind of new concepts, but absolutely you don't want to, like you said, miss on something that is working or potentially could continue to like develop and become something that really incentivizes or people really want to continue to like use your product. So I'm excited to hear that, obviously. You were talking about your role at YouTube and kind of your experience with creators. I don't think that creators in the Web3 space are any different. Maybe some are a little bit more knowledgeable when it comes to the technology, so the backend stuff that makes crypto work. But as we continue to scale the space, and if we really want mass adoption as we claim to, right, we need to be considerate of like abstracting a lot of the stuff that makes crypto and just really make it fun, usable. What are your thoughts right now of where we're at in the product space? Let's start very broadly and then much more narrowly to Unlonely. Where do you think we are in the startup space with like the creator tools that are available to us? Are we close enough to be able to bring on people who are not crypto obsessed like myself, or do we have a long way to go?
I think that the tools and the sort of the UX, which people have been complaining about for eons now, it feels like, is actually so much closer than it's ever been before. Like the stack that most people are using now, whether it's, Privy and sort of everything, like it is all pretty abstracted away, and it's clean, it's usable, it's friendly. Like I think we're there on that. I think the bigger fight that we have is around like narrative, reputation, trust. And that is almost like a bit of a campaign. I wonder what is really going to turn the tide on that. Like if it's going to be politics, regulation, or some major influencer in the kind of mainstream Web 2 space deciding that they are like all in on crypto, because so many people have just been burned in the past that really like anyone I talk to who like has worked with musicians or has worked with content creators, influencers, and things like that, like celebrities even, everyone has just seen like the kind of rumble, I don't know, just like the trash that's been left from the remains of the previous hype cycle, and everyone that like didn't really do their due diligence and jumped onto a scammy thing or jumped onto something that went under, and people have been prosecuted. So I think it's really hard to overcome that. And at the moment, if you aren't at least like as a creator or a creative of some sort, if you're not already intrinsically interested in crypto or have someone close to you that you trust that is in the crypto space, you don't want to touch it with a 10-foot pole. So that's where I'm thinking on the macro side. And that definitely applies to how we've approached things at Unlonely, where we thought about like, hey, should I tap into my YouTube network and like try to get these YouTubers to come onto Unlonely? That feels like a really easy first win or something like that. And ultimately, we just didn't think it was the right time because honestly, like coming into the conversation and having to be like, hey, first of all, let me educate you on what crypto is and why you should care. Second of all, let me tell you why it's actually not a scam, even though everything you've read in the news tells you that it's a scam. Third of all, this is why you should like leave your platform that you've been building on for 10 years and come to our small thing that like we're still figuring out. So it feels like the right place to be like really focusing on the crypto native users initially. And like once I think we hit saturation point on that, which like we're nowhere near yet because most crypto users are still in like the DeFi space, as you said, right? Like I think consumer is having a bit of its moment. It feels good to be in that moment where people are actually excited about consumer apps, building things that people actually want to use, building things that are fun for people to use. But we're still pretty early in that and getting people who like have wallets all around the world to actually engage with our apps. So that's the approach that we're taking right now. And we're hoping that over time, there is some like changes in the media. I think like people follow the smart people at the end of the day. That's what I believe. That's why I'm still in crypto. I'm just like following where I continue to engage with like really interesting smart people. That's like my motive for being here.
That's a good point. Being able to draw people to something that is so the crypto is not the easiest to understand. And that's why I don't think we necessarily need to lead with the technology. But people, and I think that's why influencers in a way are important as much as like I don't care to follow influencers' advice too much. There is a level of trust, like you mentioned earlier, that they've gained over time where people is like, oh, if they're there, that's seemingly a safe space to also participate or engage in. So that's really interesting. You also, and to also address the piece that you were talking about, like being an American founder working in the crypto space, present, it's really tough, right? Because there's a lack of clarity when it comes to regulation and policy that it's very difficult to move as quickly maybe as others or take as much risk is probably the better way to say it when it comes to like some of the crypto tools, specifically tokens. That I can see how that's like could be something that could hold back the space. And I've actually I've been very loud about improving that clarity, regulatory clarity, so that we are not held back. We're able to also make those same moves like other founders around the world. You also talked about reputation, and that's a space that I'm very interested in and passionate, and actually have built tools in the past for. I wonder if, like, when you say reputation, what your thoughts are in terms of like the reputation of the space, which I think you addressed, but also the reputation of an individual. Because as I was just mentioning, influencers have a lot of power. What do you think is necessary, or is it necessary at all, for those who are using these creative platforms, call it Unlonely, call it Pods, call it any other creative platform, to be able to measure, or measure is the wrong word. What am I trying to say here? Like, should we be measuring their reputation, I guess, because they may have some influence over others who are interested and want to participate in the space too?
That is a really interesting question. Not to flip this back on you, but I would be very interested in hearing what you mentioned that you've worked on specifically in this space. I don't think it's something that I've spent so much time thinking about. I know that like on-chain reputation does feel very interesting. I don't know, like part of me is like, oh, that would be great. We should be able to, sort out the bots from the real people who have been like really grinding away. You should get a sticker for having actually like stuck around through the bear market rather than being someone who's just like here for the hype cycles or something like that. But then there is also something very like Black Mirror, social score about it as well, right? Where it's just like, well, who's determining what contributes to good reputation or bad reputation? is that like a value system? And like, do people just maybe subscribe to different value systems, and I don't know, and is there like a decentralized way to determine what the most like democratic value system is or something like that? So maybe that gets a little bit philosophical, but I would be interested in like how it plays out. And I know that there are, like I think Airstack is doing some stuff around like trust and reputation and scores. You can get kind of like a clout score of some sort. So I think those are all really fun to have, and maybe like a great way to like sift out like who your power users would be, or what's a good target demographic for like this particular thing that you're building. But I'd be curious how it would play into like, I guess, society as a whole at a broader scale.
Yeah, I guess, and I understand like wanting to turn that question back to me. And in fact, having worked in the space of identity and reputation for almost 3 years, I can tell you that the answer is not very simple. And so I'm always really interested to hear what others have to say, because I want to learn, maybe someone's put in a lot of thought into it. Maybe they're developing something for their product. I think another word for reputation is simply an algorithm. When you look at like social systems, social networks, the algorithm, I guess, has a reputation score designed so that certain participants in that network have their content, right, or what they're sharing, much more visible than others. And I think each product, and maybe sometimes down to the feature, have different algorithms that enable some better user experience, for lack of a better word. And I think one of the things that I've found is that while there's a lot of really interesting off-chain and on-chain reputation protocols that have been created, there is this resistance against painting everything so broadly with one score to rule them all. Because there's a word you mentioned, which I think is key, and that's values. Everyone's value systems are different. I might share some things in common with you, but our value systems might be different. And so what's to say that your value system is the same system by which I should be measured, right? Or my reputation should be measured. And I think that's the issue most people have when it comes to, reputation. So I think Warpcast is a perfect example of this. They designed an algorithm to improve the user experience. And there was resistance to that, because they're like, well, why am I now being punished because of what you've determined to be a valuable user experience and the people that should be discovered? So it's, but then you ask, well, you can create your own product on top of Farcaster and create your own algorithm to then determine that. So, I think there's no easy answer to that. And I just wanted to get your thoughts. And I think that's a very good answer. Thank you.
Well, I think you bring up the algorithm as the definition for this. And the algorithm is a very loaded word. I think it has loaded connotations. And especially when I think back to like working with creators at YouTube, the algorithm was this sort of like ever looming figure that was just like a cloud hanging over their heads. That was the number one question that we would get from creators, is just like questions about the algorithm. Why is the algorithm not treating me the same way that it did? What changed about the algorithm that I need to fix my content for? Like, what are the things that I need to do to kind of, they effectively wanted to be able to game the algorithm, right? Like everyone wants to know like the quick fix things that'll like just pop them to the top of the algorithm. But then that's the entire point, is that it has to be a black box. Otherwise people will game it. And then you're not actually getting the sort of results that you want anymore. But it does feel like this very like all powerful, all encompassing thing that no one can control, like beast that you need to feed as well, because there was this element to the algorithm that was like, oh yeah, if you're not posting consistently at least like multiple times a week, then the algorithm will ding you, and like that will make your channel get blacklisted or something like that, or shadow banned. So it just feels very like rife with conspiracy. And at the same time, like being transparent about the algorithm also doesn't work for people that are going to exploit that and abuse that. So it's a tricky thing. And then the other thing about the algorithm that really freaks me out is like the hyper personalization, which on the one hand is great, right? Like I want to see content that speaks to me, that feels relevant to me, that is interesting. However, it is really, really putting us in these echo chambers. Like, I think that is 100% true. And I can feel that especially on things like TikTok, where it's like everyone has said how great the algorithm of the For You page is, right? And I totally agree with that. But it is to a dangerous extent where I would feel myself like getting fed further and like more and more, slightly more extreme content down a certain path that I had gotten into a rabbit hole with, where I would have to take myself out and be like, whoa, I'm now thinking a completely different way as a result of these like 20 videos that I've seen this topic in the last 2 minutes. And that's kind of scary. Like, I don't really feel like I'm actually like using my independent way of thinking anymore. I'm actually just buying into the stuff that's being fed to me. So that also scares me about the kind of like potential greater effects of algorithms.
Yeah, and I think you're unique in saying that you've caught yourself in that algorithm where you're no longer able to think for yourself. Not to make this a political podcast, because we could surely do that if we wanted to. But I think that's at least here in the US, I can't speak for other countries. I think that's part of the political divide, is people get so ingrained in their algorithm by what they watch and what they listen to, that they no longer have the ability to listen to both sides or two different arguments.
Yeah.
They're so stuck on a singular argument that represents them as a whole, and it is completely polarized now. And I think social networks, social systems can do something similar too, where it can completely take on a bias and reinforce that and make you believe that that's the only truth, where there's actually a lot of different truths available to you. Yeah, that's an interesting perspective to it as well. So I want to get back to Unlonely, and what I wanted to, I always try to give people flowers when I come here, when they come to this podcast. It's about happiness and friends and all that good stuff. And I want to give you your flowers, because one of the things that I love about Unlonely is that the series that appear on the platform are very human. It's a really interesting, and I'm wondering how much of this is design and how much of this is just like an occurrence of being on this platform. Is this by design to create series that are very human, that connect with us, that make us laugh, that make us cry? Like, has this been very intentional from the very moment that you started Unlonely?
I think it has been. I think we've called ourselves like a cozy space on the internet since before there was anyone else streaming on the platform besides literally just Brian. Like, daily streaming for 6 months straight, I think, was how Unlonely first started. And then we did get really lucky in that, we happened to join Farcaster really early, like I think like sub 2,000 users and stuff like that. And that early group of Farcaster, as I think a lot of people know, was just a lot of really interested, curious builders, creatives, wholesome, thoughtful people. And so a lot of definitely our first 100 users came from Farcaster as a result of just being early to that space. And I think that's really set the tone for a lot of like the culture and the values that we stand for. Obviously, like anyone can come on and have like any show, any content that they want to put on the platform. Like, we are not gating anything. We have some content policies, but like at the end of the day, we're decentralized. It's on Live Bureau. We're not trying to be like a YouTube or a Facebook or a Twitch that's like dictating what can and can't be on the platform, because we don't have advertisers to answer to, right? Like, that is kind of the difference between us and those other platforms. But I think you're right in that like what has stuck around and what's actually like garnered audiences is the real human stuff and the kind of like authentic stuff, and also the people that are like committed, like yourself, that are actually like coming, running a show a week or multiple shows a week. GM Farcaster, they've been doing this for like 8 months now, I think, since almost like last summer. Optimism, other like amazing brands out there that just like want to be able to talk directly to other humans on the other side of the keyboard, when we do so much like on the Twitter timeline, on the Farcaster timeline, like in the Telegram chats, in the DMs all the time. So it is really fun to be able to humanize people. And that's something that I have found with just like video content, live streaming in particular. Like when I've watched GM Farcaster before I'd ever met Nounish Prof or Adrian, I already felt like I was best friends with them. Like, I already felt like I really knew them as people. I had interacted with them by the time that I met them, I was like, it was sort of like, oh yeah, duh. Like, I already know you. And they were like, oh, right, this is our first time meeting. Like, we were like still feeling out the chemistry. I'm like, no. You don't understand. I have this one-way relationship with you where I definitely feel like I know your voices. They're so familiar to me. So it's really fun to be able to be built, like part of building that human connection, I think, in this super, super online world.
No, that's really wonderful, because I think it just comes through, right? And the one thing I've always said, and I wonder if you agree with this, is a lot of what a company, a product becomes is influenced very much by its founders, its creators. So I feel like a lot of that humanity is coming through because that's what you and Brian are putting into it. You're putting in that human element, right? That care, and it's very, very, kind of tangible when someone connects to those experiences. And as a creator myself, I want to make sure that I'm bringing that to the platform, because I don't think that there's any creator out there, or any creator worth their salt, that doesn't know that each platform should be treated very differently. You're not just going to engage across all platforms the exact same way. So I'm trying to study Unlonely a little bit better. We're talking to you. How can I bring in much more of this humanity, aside from what I'm doing today, in the future, to kind of create value, not just extract value from the platform?
Yeah, I love that question. Something that we've been doing, and this segues well into the Love Unleveraged shows, has been bootstrapping our own content. And that has been really great in terms of like a growth mechanism for us, because it's something that we produce and run and plan and promote and brand and recruit for completely, like kind of head to toe on our own. It's mostly me, and then it's Brian hosting the shows. That is like most of it. And then we have Danny, our developer in San Francisco, who helps us build all the features. So it's a very, very tight, hacky startup team. But Love Unleveraged has been one of these things where I think like we've been able to really have some space to play with the experimental features that we're bringing about. Because at first we started off and we're like, okay, we're like Web3 Twitch. That's like the easiest way to understand Unlonely. And I think we did that, and we sort of tried to mimic the features that Twitch offered in a Web3 way. And so we had like creator tokens, and then you could sort of buy creator tokens to support the channel, and then also to maybe like unlock some special actions or something like that, which is super fun. But it ended up being, I think, too similar to what Twitch already had. And obviously not as good, because they are a much bigger company with many, many more years of building and a much bigger team. And B, it just like wasn't offering anything new. So we have zeroed in on like, okay, we want to build new on-chain experiences. We want to build new user behaviors with live streams, and like really tap into the fact that live streams, to your point, are really human, and they're also like in real time. So there's something like magical about the fact that like I can see a chat, respond to it right now, have a conversation with all the people in the audience, or if they were to like pump a certain token and then that affected something on the stream, I think that's a way more fun and engaging viewing experience than just passively consuming something on the internet like we mostly do every day. So that was sort of the impetus behind the original Love Unleveraged series. And then we just thought like a dating show is so fun. Like we need something a little bit more mainstream in terms of the content that can just like get everyone bought in. Who doesn't want to find love? Who doesn't want to believe in love? And it felt like there was a gap in the market in terms of like crypto dating and reality TV. And personally, I think like it's always been a guilty pleasure of mine watching various reality TV dating shows. So we are now on our third season of Love Unleveraged, which is really fun and exciting. And each time there's a new twist. And this season, the twist is like the challengers sort of format. So, one bachelorette, two guys vying for her love. Each guy gets a token launched for him. We had our first episode yesterday. It was really fun. I have just spent the last few hours editing all the highlight clips and stuff. So those will be coming very soon. And then the audience can just pump or dump each guy's token to control who speaks on the date. So one person is muted, one person is unmuted, depending on the price of their token. And then you kind of like see the volatility, like you see people flip-flopping depending on like how good the chemistry is over time. And at the end, the girl gets to pick who she felt like she had the best chemistry with. And then that token lives on, the other token dies. The liquidity from the losing token pumps into the winning one. And then that's kind of the end of the episode. So I think we would love to see, I guess, like streamers getting creative with those features that we're building. And we know that, it takes some creativity, it takes planning, it's a lot of work to put on these shows. But I do think it's so rewarding, like seeing people engage with it, have a lot of fun with it. The like stories that it brings about, like I love contributing to the culture. And I really feel like especially when you go to conferences and you meet people in person, you realize how much of this is like now in the crypto consumer mainstream culture. Like people are referencing things that happened in the show. People are meeting people in real life and being like, oh my God, I recognize you from being on the show and all of that. And like my network has expanded so dramatically in a very like fun and organic way from recruiting people and being the crypto matchmaker, which is a hilarious, hilarious job title to have. But I wouldn't have it any other way. It's been like the most fun thing that I've done in my career thus far, like easily, hands down.
So is your LinkedIn profile now say professional matchmaker on Unlonely?
I should put that there, huh? It'll really confuse the normies.
Definitely. It's like, wait, I thought you were working in crypto. It's like, no, I am. It's consumer crypto now. So, professiontional matchmaking. Yeah, absolutely.
Matchmaking is the go-to market.
Oh, heck yes. I mean, let's just start with the fact that matchmaking is something you can use in so many different ways. It's not just, in romantic relationships. It's important because I feel like we're going on a tangent now, so let's go. Matchmaking is a very hard skill to acquire. You need to have a really good sense of people, at an emotional, a mental level, right? And then kind of take all of this data and say, how are these two people going to work together? In fact, I don't want to say too much, but I have been cooking up a concept around this matchmaking idea, but in the space of startups. That's all I'll say. So maybe that's what's coming to Unlonely after ECC.
I would love to see that. I would love to help support in any way. Knowledge share, best practice share, if that's helpful.
From the professional matchmaker, of course I would love that help.
Yes. And I think that's so true. Like we even found that with the last season where like obviously we've been doing this sort of like it's all been dating, but we had Lee Jin from Variant come on as the Bachelorette for one of the episodes. And she said, hey, I love your guys' idea, but I would love for my episode to be pitches, startup pitches, like rather than people actually just hitting on me and like trying to take me out on a date, which I was like, okay, fair enough. You're a professional individual. Let's make this work for you. We'd love to have you on the show. And then the more I thought about it, I was like, it's actually the exact same dynamic. Like when you're pitching yourself as a romantic partner and trying to build chemistry and trying to build banter and seeing if you guys get along and if you like have shared interests, shared visions, all that kind of, it is like actually the exact same mechanism and like kind of dynamic behind the scenes. So it was quite funny. Like it made for a great episode where it did feel like it was sort of the same vibe. Like we didn't have to change anything about the show. We just had a couple people come in with, pitch decks instead of just riffing and bantering.
I mean, maybe the dating world, romantic dating, would be a lot better if we came with our pitch decks. And it's like, look, this is what I have to offer, okay? Let's be honest, let's put this forward, and then we can see we vibe. Up. Yeah, but I mean, I don't want to waste your time.
Yeah, and put a little prep work into it, right? Like at least if you come in with a pitch deck, you've like thought about what you're trying to get out of it, what you have to offer, what the like vision, the 5-year vision is and all of that. And like, I think that could make for just better conversations all around.
I've always said that in my dating career, I learn more about myself than anything else. And so I think that if you're going to be putting a pitch deck together about who you are for a date, I can't believe we're having this conversation, but I'm here for it. It would mean that you've actually put in some thought, as you've said, to understand who you are. And hopefully, all of the
Yes.
experiences before it have helped you understand yourself a little bit better so that when you do
Yep.
find the right person, you're like, look, honestly, I know who I am. I know who I'm looking for, who's a good match for me. This is either going to
Yeah.
work or not, you know?
Absolutely.
And that's
Know
it.
thyself.
So that's all you need to know for anybody who's single out there and doesn't know how to find love. First of all, watch Love Unleveraged. Second of all, create a pitch deck, understand yourself, and put a lot of thought into, developing that. We've got what? We've got about 10 minutes left. So I want to make sure we're touching on everything we need to talk about. Anything else you think we've missed here? I know I have one more question, but anything else we've missed so far that we need to be talking about before we close the podcast?
I will just I'll plug the summer season one more time, because previously we've done very clustered seasons, like 1 week at a time or 2 weeks at a time. This time we're going weekly, Tuesdays, 6 p.m. Eastern, every week throughout the whole summer. We have no end date currently in mind, so we're also actively recruiting people as we go. I think the show will just continue to build momentum over the summer, and it's going to be a fun time. So if you are single, you're looking to be match made, if you want to just speculate on people that are on the show, it's going to be a fun time.
You heard it here first. If you are listening to this podcast, wherever you're listening to, make sure, if you're single and you're looking for love, to sign up on Love Unleveraged. This is going to be a fun experience. I can't wait. It's really interesting to hear that you don't have a set end date, because for example, for our podcast, I do a 6-episode series. At least that's how I set out for all of these, because I want to make sure that I'm touching on different topics. Trends change. You want to stay as flexible as possible, and it's usually just me producing these. And what ends up happening is I get oversubscribed. I think this is episode number 9 or 10, and I've got 2 more to go.
Oh, wow.
So you just never know. Especially this series of Crypto Consumer, I think it's been really interesting to a lot of folks, and they want to be a part of it. They want to share kind of what they're building and their thoughts on consumer crypto. So I'm just excited that we were finally able to get you on, and get to know you a little bit more, because I've got to be fair. We see too much of Brian. I told you this when we were coming on here. I said, I love Brian, but I see too much of Brian. I want to get to know you more, because I don't think the world really knows your story as much. And I'm glad that we were able to help share that story.
Thank you. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. Brian is, I would say I'm not camera shy, but Brian is whatever the opposite of camera shy is. He's attention seeking. He's far too comfortable in front of audiences. And this has been the case from a very young age. My mom and I will always talk about this, where from the age of 3, he's never had social anxiety. He would go up to an adult and be like, hey, I want to be your friend. Or he'd be in middle school and he'd meet my friends who were 2 grades older than me. And then he would just walk over to their house and be like, hey, can you drive me to get a burger? And they would be like, you're 12 years old. Why are you at my house right now? So I think that's part of his character that has very much been consistent over time. And in general, I'm quite happy playing the behind the scenes older sister, keeping everything in check, more type A personality. But you're right. I should also be a little bit more front facing and also get my story, my perspective, my thoughts out there as well. Because otherwise he can be a little bit of a hog, I think, a screen hog.
I just love the sibling energy. And I've got to say, I've got a sister, but our relationship is definitely nowhere like both of yours. I don't even know if we could work together. So I just love the energy. That's so beautiful to see.
We never planned on working together.
Oh, really? That was just accidental? 2020 came around and you both looking at each other what should we do? It's let's build a company together.
I think it was really luck of the timing, because if I hadn't been already looking to leave Google at that point, I don't think Brian could have single-handedly pitched me to leave the safety net that was Google until I was ready to go. Like I was already ready to go. I knew that I was leaving. I was actually leaving to do an MBA. And the whole point of doing the MBA was to just sort of like shake things up, take risks, buy myself some time to explore and do a bunch of different internships and stuff like that. And I think without having created that space for myself, which of course is a very risk averse way of being like, I'm going to do risks, but like under the guise of being an MBA student or something like that.
Right.
I wouldn't have been in a mental, psychological space to like be open to doing something like starting our own company. And then I also never thought that we would really have overlapping interests because I mean, I've told you my background, but like I studied liberal arts, like I studied philosophy, politics, and economics. I thought I was going into like fashion, retail, business. And Brian studied chemical engineering and math. And I thought he was going to go work in oil post-grad because those were like the highest paying jobs for a chemical engineer. So it was kind of just like by sheer luck and coincidence that we ended up both wanting to do startups or like something startups adjacent. And then that we both fell into crypto kind of around the same time and just started talking about ideas and landed on one where I was like, yeah, like I can't say no to this. This is like the perfect thing for me to be able to do with like everything that I've done up until now.
That's amazing. Well, I mean, I'm personally very excited for everything that Unlonely represents and the way that the product is working now. I'm excited for the series as you're developing them. I'm excited for whatever Unlonely continues to do to develop the platform. As a creator, I'm already using it, but I want to keep building more on there. And like I said, I've already teased a little bit. So stay tuned if you're listening and if you're interested in learning how like relationships and dating could work outside of romance. Stay tuned. More on that later. All right, Grace. Well, give us all the links. Post well, I'll be over there and I'll be developing it while I'm on holiday because I'm taking a week off before and after. And then when I come back, I'll be fully refreshed. Yeah.
Amazing.
So give me all the links. Where can people find you? Where can people connect with Unlonely?
On Farcaster, just at Unlonely. I'm at Grace. On Twitter, at Unlonely_app. The website is Unlonely.app. Those are all the places. We'll hope to see you online.
Amazing. Definitely. We'll catch you all on Farcaster because nothing else matters. None of the other social platforms matter. We're all connecting on Farcaster. All right. Well, thanks so much for tuning in to another episode of Crypto Sapiens.